Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have a very special guest, Ingrid Boone. Ingrid, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Four seasons, and I still have to think about the intro. Like I've kept it the same. Thank you so much for coming on, Ingrid. It's been it's been fun talking to you, via Facebook Messenger. So I was excited, when you asked me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I haven't really talked about those, products and things like that, on the channel before. So I'm trying to get, some different, writing perspectives, different people, just to, get some different cultural diffusion and just get some different, ideas coming from myself and others. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and, sharing your work with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. So we'll start with that first one. And it's just really generic, right? But what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm that kid who started when they were five. Like, doesn't everybody start that way? Um, it's true, but I used to write novels in art journals by
Oh,
hand. I loved my handwriting, so I think that was really what it was about. I had nothing to do with my writing. And what would happen is I would get to the end of a book and I would be like, oh, I've run out of space and now what? So I'm sure I wrote full novels back then, but I
oh,
wouldn't even. I think I might have one journal left, but
oh, wow.
um, anyway, then I went on and went to college, had a career, did all the things, worked in the technology industry, worked in science industries, worked all kinds of marketing for entertainment, video games, every like I've done a whole lot in the tech side. And then one day I was like, I need to write a book because that's really what I was put on this earth to do, I guess. And so, no, I had a goal to do it by the time I was 40. So I
Oh,
wrote a
okay.
book. It was a terrible book. No, it was a book that it was okay. And
I like that. It was a book that I wrote. Yeah. I
I
feel
mean,
you.
so I published that on Create Space way back when that all this like self-publishing was brand new. And I had been like subscribing to Writer's Digest magazine since I was like 14 or something. So I like how to write a query letter, how to do this, how to find an agent, how to do. But my brain said, why? You could just put it out there on the internet yourself. So I did. And it sold 17 copies in its entire lifetime.
17 more than most people, though, just saying.
Well, that's true. That was 2011. Um, anyway, so then I like went back to having a job and a life and a whatever. And I really just, I do a lot of copy editing and copywriting and writing for the businesses that I'd worked for and whatnot. I've written game design documents. I've written, giant technical journals and all that kinds of stuff. Um, so I was like, no, I want to write creative again. But somehow I went back to that book that I had originally written. I rewrote it,
Oh,
completely
oh,
rewrote it.
cool.
Well, actually, no, that's not true. I wrote a sequel on a cruise ship on my phone, the whole sequel. And so in 9 days, I had 90,000 words. Don't ask how
Wow.
that don't ask how that works. That's like magic. I can't do that anymore. It was like it had to come out now. And then because I had rewritten that, I had to go back and retro the other book because it was a sequel. So when I retro that, I went to workshops and I did worked with an agent, developmental editor agent. I worked with other people. I got all kinds of help that I'd never ever had before, and it was really amazing how much I learned in a very short amount of time. I wish I'd have known all along, right? Um, so then, I rewrote that book and published it last year, and then I've rewritten the sequel. And my rewrites are like 80-90% rewrites. Like that story, not the final story, but still. Because things have to make sense, and I can't deal with things not making sense. So I had to make sense. And now I have the third book is supposed to come out this fall. I'm at this point where I'm like, maybe it'll come out in January. So,
I
but
know
it'll
that
it'll be
feeling.
soon. It'll be soon. So at least so I have a trilogy. Yay. And then because I was doing a lot of like sci-fi writing workshops and all that kind of stuff, and I was in a workshop where people were talking about science and infusing science in your books and all this stuff. And I realized that people don't know anything about science. And I'm a science teacher, and I thought, oh my God, I can't deal with this. So I wrote a book about space, and then I put that out there. And then I was like, no, I have to write. Like, there's a whole bunch of things I have to write, especially because I love biology. So I had to write the biology one. So the space one's like 80 pages, and the biology one came to like 375 pages. And I said, that's not going to work. It's a desk reference. So let's chop that down. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Finishing these books, and then and they'll be there for people. You could Google this information, but I'm not sure you want the FBI to look up or to see you looking up something that are in this book. So it's kind of maybe more of a helpful thing for if you just want to kind of keep it private, or you just need a quick like thumb through. But also, I found that even in editing my own versions of them, I would look at the there's chunks. It's all very chunky bullet point stuff. So I'd look at a chunk and I'd be like, oh wait, and it would like inspire a whole like, oh, what about this like mold civilization made of like slime mold, and how would that work? And it just and my brain would go off on a tangent. So who knows? Maybe this will inspire some weird things, and it'll help people put some realism in their books. And I don't know. That's kind of the idea. So there you go. Done. 50 minutes. We're done.
Well, I get what you're saying though, because like there have been so many like I opened up my my tabs, and I have some real world stuff. I have some mythological stuff. So I have like like what type of ballistic ear protection or eye protection do Marines have? And then over here, my other tab is like like how much ichor is too much ichor, from this beast or something. I don't know. It just I feel like, and then over here I have another one like how long does it take for a dead body for rigor mortis to set in or whatever. So I definitely feel
that.
you there.
Oh, thank you. That needs to go in there. Let me write that down.
I definitely understand what you're saying, because if you could just go to a one-stop shop book of just like the weird writers' questions that could get you, arrested or at least watched by the FBI, that'd be like a great coffee table book. But yeah, like I definitely get it, because like there's so many times I'm just like, I think a lot of times I'm asking like science questions. I feel like things that I just didn't learn. I was learning things like helpful things like mitosis, but not how long it takes rigor mortis to set in for a dead body, or what happens in those processes. So I didn't take the CSI class. That was like an honors thing for our high school, but those are the kind of things where I'm like, oh, I really wish I knew, or I want to learn as an adult. So I totally understand. I really hoping if the FBI is listening right now, like I'm just right. So I love there's like that little graphic that someone came up with, like cartoon, where they go to the guy's house and he's like, I'm a writer.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so I totally understand that. That's really funny. I just realized that one of my questions actually got cut off, which is actually about your trilogy. So we'll have to talk about that here in just a sec. We talked a little bit about number 2, but I just want to just make sure that we're just clear for the audience on what genre or genres you currently write in and why.
I write science fiction. I've been a sci-fi fan my whole life. I'm a total like Star Wars nerd. Also love Star Trek. Also love fantasy. Also love historical fiction, but really sci-fi. And it's kind of wavered too. Like I started in fantasy, and then I went into sci-fi for a while when I was like a teen, and then I would read like even like Timothy Zahn's early books that like nobody's ever heard of it, Black Collar and stuff like that. Like when I was a teen, and then of course Star Wars books, and then it's fantasy. I don't know. I'd go back and forth, but I love all of it, and I read all kinds of weird stuff now. I just love how broad things have become. Everything's not epic fantasy anymore, right, or whatever. So yeah. So mostly I write science fiction. I like hard science fiction. I like space opera. I love spaceships, space battles. Space battles are my thing. Apparently, that's my jam. Strategy, crazy. But what's weird is when you're writing them, and sometimes when you're just they sort of just flow out. You're like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then if you go back and you look at it, you're like, well, logically, does that make sense? And I'm like, yeah, actually, it kind of does.
Yeah.
Like maybe I should have been in the military or something. I should have been. I don't know. So.
Well, that's awesome. So I do want to just talk, start off talking, about your, science fiction trilogy here. So because this is where I first had seen your books was, I think it was like a joint group actually on Facebook. I always like to tell people the origin story where I saw their books, because I do think it helps, because you never know what's being seen where. So I had seen you post in a mutual group, and I'm trying to figure out which I think it was actually book 2. Maybe it was the Warrior's Shade. I could have swore because it was like the orange cover. So I could have swore it was that one. But anyway, so I had seen it and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then, I was checking everything out. Love your website, by the way, if anybody has a minute to go down in the description and check out Ingrid's website. It's really awesome. But yeah, it was just really cool. And that's where, I Facebook, friend requested you, and I was like, this got to be somebody that, I check in with later. But can you just tell us a little bit, I know a lot of people have asked me the last 2 seasons for authors to talk more about just the books in general and not just the writing. We got a lot of readers now on here, which is awesome that we're attracting not just writers and creators, but readers and watchers or listeners, I guess, depending on what the media is. But can you tell us more about the trilogy itself and how you came up with those ideas?
Sure. So the trilogy is about a young man who's like a tactical genius, which of course, no extension for me whatsoever. Just kidding. Is a young man who he works for a rather terrible galactic warlord, really awful, evil, terrible guy. And he really doesn't like to work for this guy. So he needs to get out, right? The whole premise of the first book is he's trying to get away from this situation. But the warlord likes him, like favors him. It's like his little, red-haired child that he loves. So he's kind of in this situation where he's like, I've got to like hide all this stuff from you about me trying to escape, and I have to do all these horrible, terrible things you want me to do. And so he's in a constant dilemma. He gets assigned to work with it's very tropey, the teenage girl assassin.
Mm.
And I invented her like way back when I was very young, but like she really grew like through my life. So I had to include her. And then she really was originally the main character, but then I really just loved this like handler of her. So he ended up taking over the whole show.
Mm.
So he has to handle her to do basically she's an assassin, but she doesn't actually do any assassinating. It's kind of a weird, I don't know how to even describe my own book, but basically she's wild card, and completely destroys every plan he makes. And so it just, you can see where all the conflict is there. So in the second book, not that I want to spoil anything or give anything away, because of course everything turns out okay, right? In the second book, she also continues to ruin every single thing he plans. But he also, in that case, ruins his own life. So, so in the third book, we have to redeem all of these problems. So in the third book, it's the Tempest's Fury, and she's called the Tempest sometimes, like referred to because she's wild. So it's really going to be a little more with her, instead of just being a sort of side antagonist. She's going to really drive a lot more of the plot this time.
Oh, that's awesome. So you said a couple of things there. One, so the first thing I just want to mention was like when I looked at the blurb for like book one, I just thought that was like a really cool premise. So instead of just the same, no, not trying to be insulting, but it said this the same old like Ender's Game or whatever. I just like where you took this tactical genius and had him working for the wrong side and then having to try to get out. I was like, talk about conflict. And I don't know, it just sounded really interesting to me. So I just thought that was like a really, really cool concept. So it just goes to show you, right? You could take something tropey like a tactical genius from Ender's Game, Orson Scott's card stuff with Ender, and then completely turn it on its head, but just by adding, one very specific detail. And then all of a sudden you have a totally different story. So I just got to say, I always love when people do that, take something I really enjoy and then make me think, ooh, how would that work? Both the reader and the writer and me were like, check, please. So I thought that was really cool. But you did mention something that I also want to ask you about, Ingrid, where you said, that you've had this idea for this character for a while and it's kind of like grown with you. So could you maybe talk just a little bit about that? Because I definitely have had that experience too, where I had a character that I came up with, I think, because I was originally going to be an illustrator. I wanted to do, graphic novels and stuff. And I came up with a character, I think at age 19, pretty close, 18, 19, when I went to college, freshman year. And then that character and his best friend have now grown with me into something that I just was so surprised. And I think people will really like, down the road. So I'm just curious at what your experience was in terms of that growth and how that character has changed. So,
wow, I could talk for 6 hours about that kind of topic. she's an extension of my early childhood, where I was definitely every stereotype of Gen X that there is in the 60s, right? Lived on my own, lived on like I was a wild child too. I couldn't obviously murder people, but I loved like GI Joe, and I loved like all kinds of action stuff, right? And I wanted to just go out, and I just wanted to be this like wild and purposeful but wild person, and I just couldn't, be.
Yeah.
You're not allowed. You go to jail when you're like 12,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
or you can, but it's probably not advised. So she's always sort of just been this like fantasy of mine that like is an extension of me. Um, I did not have red hair my whole life. I didn't get that until I was in my like late teens, early 20s, maybe. I can't even remember. But of course, I love the fiery red haired trope,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that because I felt like that was me, even though I didn't get that gene, stupid genes. Um, and then when Heir to the Empire came out, and
Oh,
then we had Mara Jade, right? And I was like, oh
oh,
my God, he like put her in a body. And like she's
that's awesome.
so, and I was 20 and she was 18. And so again, it was still an extension of me. But then as we go through life and media shifts from being very male dominated to it became much more like we have a lot of girl assassin trope things going on now,
Yeah.
which I love. I love every one of them, but and so I was worried too that I was going to like bring this character into this and just be another one of those. So that's kind of why I also made her more of, she's not an antagonist so much as she's his, they become friends, but she just out of her wildness does not, out of her recklessness,
I think
just
we
can't
all had those.
do the
We
right
all
thing.
have those friends.
Yeah, just
You,
can't do the right thing. She's the
you
one who's
only
going
invite
to
you don't invite them to certain things, right? Under supervision, like
exactly. So so that's kind of how she evolved into being like the younger version of that character that could then basically mess everything up for him. So
cool. And of course, I love that you mentioned Mara Jade, one of my favorite characters of all time.
like a lot of I feel yeah. I was just reading an article about how Lucasfilm was like, nope, we're not, nope, never gonna make her canon. It's just not gonna happen. And
I honestly, so I know we're like going that way. I try and not go that way, but like it just drives me nuts. Because like for me, reading the comics, reading the books, playing all the games that happen after the Turn of the Jedi, and around Phantom Menace and whatever. Like I mean, I just think everything that wasn't on screen for those first six movies was just so much better. And even like looking at like Splinter of the Mind's Eye, right, which had a completely like Luke and Leia at that time weren't brother and sister, and Darth Vader was, spoilers, but the book's like 35 years old at least. It's older than me. So and like Darth Vader was gonna die, Luke was gonna take over, and then have this thing with the Emperor. I mean, there was just so many cool, things, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna scrap that. But then even other things they did, like like Shells of the Empire has got to be my favorite Star Wars book of all time. I've read it probably 40, 50 times. I wish that they had done something like that, but to ignore such pivotal characters, I think, it's just really not smart. I think of Disney, and it's, people like you and me that are like, oh, these are amazing characters. Like to not go with the Yazam Bong, I think was just like absolutely in some way or shape or form with those amazing characters. And especially when you had, these remainders of the original cast, I think was just a crazy, it was just a waste really. Right. And I mean, just had such great writing. Luke Skywalker, like Luke, I don't think it was Vector Prime with Ari Salvatore. Maybe it was either book one or with him or book two, the next one in the Uzumbong. And Luke was the coolest character of all time. Like the lightsabers aren't working on the Uzumbong, and he just mows them down when nobody else can figure it out, and just shows like he just like this character he's trying to go after like Jacene or something like that, who got captured. And I just think to say that, right, that like, oh, we're gonna ignore Mara Jade, like one of the cool, not even just in Star Wars, one of the coolest characters of all time, not even female characters, just coolest characters of all time with such depth, I think was just an absolutely ridiculous notion. And then there's so many others, right? Kirkanis, Dash Rendar, like you name it, right? I do like, like Dr. Alpha and some of these other ones, that have, come to the forefront. But So I think they've done a good job, of creating some of those characters. But yeah, I think it's crazy to look back at canon that you and I find like holier than thou and say, oh, we're just gonna use these
We're just
amazing
going to complete.
characters. So,
We're going to bring in one character from
yeah,
a group of cast, but we're not going to bring the others. Like,
yeah, I
okay,
just, yep,
yeah,
yeah. And the worst one, like Ben Solo, in my opinion. But and then
right.
change him completely. Like it was crazy.
I think one of the challenges that they have too with all of the pseudo fan hate about these female characters that they're bringing in now, like Rose and all this pseudo fan hate about people of color, and all this pseudo fan hate about what. And I say
Oh yeah.
pseudo because I don't think real fans really feel that way. I think
Oh
real
yeah.
fans are happy to get what they get and enjoy
Yeah.
it, and assume it all, and they don't have to like it, but they're not going to be trolls. Um, but I think bringing Mara Jade would really it'd be like, look, we can do a female character that everyone already loves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah, well, I feel like there was a lot of them like that, right? Where you're just like, why did you leave these people in the dust? I said, my friend and I we said right from the start, like offset, we were hoping that instead of doing the Force Awakens, we were actually hoping that they would do Knights of the Old Republic, and I think that would just been a smoother move. But I just want to bring it back to what we're talking about here, right? That was that like Mara Jade, clearly had an influence on how you develop this character. And I guarantee like you look at her, like, and that's a great one for me too, because I got to a certain point writing, and my friends were like, "Yeah, there's some good stuff here," but it's like all dudes, and I'm like, this was years ago, but I'm like, that's a good point, And then but I really went and looked back at characters like her, and I'm like, why did I love this character? What was it about this character that was so cool? And I have so many, just not even just female characters, just other characters, have just gotten better just thinking on like really like what is characterization. Sometimes I'll just go back and rewatch something like Firefly and be like, why did I like River? Why did I like Jane? Or whatever. Why did I not like, Jane or something like that, and I think it just really adds, just more depth, and it's more enjoyable for you to write. So then, people enjoy it more to read. So, but yeah, if we ever get to the Star Wars level, people don't worry. Ingrid and I will put all of the characters in. Will not
that's
do
right.
this
That's
this
right.
thing to you.
I'm in this mood right now where I want to rewrite this Rings of Power BS that's on TV right now, because I'm like, what? How? What? My whole every like scene, I'm like, and not even about it being like correct or any of that. Just like, who wrote this? This is terrible.
I actually really enjoyed. I enjoyed season one. Like, despite I was just like, I can't control it, right? It's like Star Wars. And I cannot wait to go back and finish the Acolyte. I've just gotten so busy. I've been reading, I've been just writing, I've just been spending time with my kid. I just haven't really had time. I've been watching Person of Interest every once in a while, and studying Jim Caviezel's character and some of those. That was like, holy moly. I'm trying to get more in the mindset of my character. And Nathaniel and Jim Caviezel are very similar. I'd say Nathaniel's just a little kinder, but that like I will help you no matter what, particularly if you're an innocent, or a kid or whatever. But like, I will end you if you get in their way, or me, get in my way of helping, particularly if you're an evil god or a monster or something like that. So I've been really studying that, but like, I don't know. It's just like, I watched episode 1 and I was so thrilled after my birthday for season 2, Rings of Power, episode 1. I was so thrilled. I fell asleep. And no joke, then I tried it again. And I was just like, I just think as a first episode, it was just like, I'm really not looking forward. I'm sure there are parts get better. I'll use it as a character, or I'll use it as a writing study, right? But I was just like, so Acolyte, I loved the first episode. I just got too busy, but it's just like, it's been kind of hard for me to, to like reset in order to go there. But I think it's really good to know as a writer, right, that like, to go back and look at those things and think like, okay, this is why Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, right? Like, I would like to go back eventually and watch part 1 just to figure out why the first 35-40 minutes didn't work for me, and kind of go from there, because I loved the first Dune. I started watching the second Dune and I just got kind of bored on it. So, but I think it's really good, right, as writers, for us to to take those things, and creators to take those things into account, to learn as much as possible from them. But yeah, it might be a while till I go back to season 2, Rings of Power. But
yeah, Yeah, it's making me sad.
Yeah.
We're still watching it. We don't stop.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have to
because it's Lord
consume
of
the
the Rings.
things,
Yeah.
and again, it is a study of like, why doesn't this work?
Yeah.
Especially from scene to scene when you're like, why doesn't he just do this? Like, what is the
Well,
logic? And that's the kind of stuff when I go back and rewrite my
yeah.
books, like, why didn't he just do that? It would
Yeah.
have changed this whole trajectory. Like,
Yep.
this stupid. So I either have to justify that somehow, or I have to change that trajectory because I can't
Yep.
stand it. Those
Well,
loopholes, those things, they make me crazy.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Anger, because I'm going to actually bring it back to Star Wars and just talk real quick about a private conversation I had with a friend of mine and talk about two characters from Rise of Skywalker. If you had changed their characters and just said, like, these two characters wouldn't do this thing, the whole movie would have made sense and people would have enjoyed it more. And that's going to be with Finn and with Luke Skywalker. So you're trying to tell me, right, that Luke Skywalker's doing all these things, and then that was his criticism of Yoda and Obi-Wan, that they just went to the desert and gave up. That if you look at any of the books, right, and that's what's not good about them ignoring canon and then coming up with their new canon, is then they're ruining all of our expectations of Luke Skywalker, particularly after Yuuzhan Vong. And he's the forefront of that. So you change his character in that movie and in that trilogy and have him being the godly being of good or balance that he should have been, just whooping booty, and that entire franchise would have been saved. Now, can you imagine, right? Like Rey's trying to get to him, and whatever with whatever still, and then he's gonna help, and then they back to back just kick everybody's booty. Now take Finn. That ticked me off because it definitely seemed like he was gonna be the other Force user, and then all of a sudden they took it back, gave him a random quest that made no sense. And that's what always drives me nuts. Now, you change those two character storylines, that entire, even leaving Force Awakens the way it was, which I enjoyed, leave that and then go for that. All of a sudden, that sets up your third movie for being, I think, one of the greatest, movies of all time. So I agree with you. I think it's such a shame when you're just not following, what your characters would do. But I think you're right that you should ask yourself, right, like, what's the thing that makes sense here? Would this make sense for this character to do? And if not, I think you're right. Rewrite it.
And I think when writers struggle with that sort of characterization, there's a lot of that questioning of who is this character really? Like, so for example, my Elion, my assassin girl, has been in my mind forever. I know, like, every breath she takes.
Mm.
For Boone, the main character, I had to like really deeply evaluate who he is and what he
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
doing. Why? Because, and then there's a point where I was like, well, wait, is he really like in love with this person, or is he just like duped by this person? Like there's all these little and then you have to go, okay, well, maybe it's both. So you're constantly trying to like make sense of everything. And this might just gonna go back to my science books real fast.
Yeah.
The whole point is I would love for people to use real science as a foundation to make sense of the things that they write. It's okay to imagine things that are completely out of your brain, but it's because your brain has already made sense of something. And so how do you bring that to life using the right words, or just somehow relating it to something so that other people, it makes sense for them too. And if it doesn't, then it's like you lose that suspense of disbelief, or whatever the phrase is. My brain's doing that thing.
No, it's totally true. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
You want people to suspend their disbelief, but they're not going to if they're like, well, what?
Yeah. Well, there's I'm totally blanking on one of the Forgotten Realms guys. If it was Troy Denning or maybe it was Orson Scott Card, I forget, but like, or Mel Odom, one of those guys has like creating your own monsters, like writing manual. And I'm actually going back to it because it was so cool. But like one of the main things that they talked about was like going with the fear. So me would be like snakes, right? I have a phobia of snakes for a lot of reasons. Got attacked by a couple like random circumstances, right? As a kid, it just has ruined me. Like I tried doing, the therapy, and it just made it worse. So, touching their scales and stuff. Well, but I think it was Troy did it, but makes such a good point in the first couple of chapters that you want to go with what's the basic fear that most people have, and pick something that's real. And you go with a real creature, a real animal or a figment of them that's real. So I always find it freaky with the frogs that are poisonous, right? And they're so bright, and it's like that just freaks me out. So maybe I take something like that and then then add the fantastical in there. So I totally agree with you, because I think that Pitch Black, right, with Vin Diesel, like it was terrifying, because to think, right, that there are nocturnal creatures on a dark planet, and that, follow you by sound, right, and that are stronger than us. Like, I think that was such a great movie, because it wasn't a dragon, it wasn't whatever, it was literally like a flying Komodo dragon that's blind, right, on a dark planet. Like, that made total sense. I think it was scary because it was based in real fear. So I totally agree with you. I think even something like that, right? But that there's a lot with science involved there too, right? And evolution of animals, or different features, things like that. I like a lot of people that do a lot of science fiction with those kind of things, or the aliens, right? And I always do my aliens more like like that, like what actually makes sense in terms of evolution, or if you're in this circumstance. So I totally agree with you, and I think that adding a little bit of realism, it grounds you in that reality, right? And in our reality, and then you're able to then think with about the fantastical, or with the science fiction mind, and kind of go from there.
And in fantasy, the Brandon Sanderson's metal magic,
Oh yeah,
or whatever, like it's
yeah,
it may not be realistic science in some
yeah,
respects, but like the fact that metal has properties, and that humans have
yep,
always loved these weird properties of metal, like silver has
yeah,
weird, magical healing properties, or whatever, antimicrobial, or
yep,
copper, and use copper magnets or whatever on your
yeah,
wrists,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever. So we've always had this sense of like, it makes sense to people because we already know about it. It already makes sense to us in a way, even though we know it may not be true or may not be real, but it's okay because there's a connection there to what we already know.
Yeah,
So
and I totally agree with you. And the other thing too, like even like historically speaking, right, or mythologically speaking, like the lost metal, right? So that's like big in first Mistborn book, right? And then they keep going with that legend and stuff. And that's like I had saw an interview with Brandon talking about kind of where those ideas came from. And talked about in ancient times, like whatever, like we as a historian, I'm like, we have to have had a lost metal, because whether or not it's from Atlantis and whatever they called it, Atlantium or whatever, it's like there's in Egypt, they have all these things, and everybody in ancient times talks about this metal that was stronger than anything. So to me, it's really interesting because, yeah, right. Like we definitely have a metal that, people use at some point, and it really made an impact. Now, whether it was an early steel or what, I don't know, but we don't know what it was. So to me, it's a lost metal. So even just knowing that though, and going into Mistborn, that made, the lost alloy like so much cooler. So I totally agree with you. Whether you're going science, history, or even like we just talked about basic biology, right? Just adding something that's real. And then I think you made a good point, right? Like adding the fantastical around it, I think it's like a door opens, right? Like a door opens and people make a connection, and they're like, oh, I kind of like this. And then, they're more readily accepting of whatever it is you're writing or whatever your characters are doing. So no, I totally agree. That's super
thank you
cool.
for saying that all for me so beautifully.
Ah, sometimes I get it right. Sometimes like the other day, I don't think I would have gotten it right at all. So and I just wanted to mention too, just so we could go back, because you did talk about fantasy. So I just want to make sure, because I didn't see the Born to Valhalla for you before. So I was just curious at what that was in terms of book or product for you, just that way you could tell our audience, because must have missed that one on your website before. I didn't see that.
It's way at the bottom of my reader page, right? So
I
like,
think it was on my phone. I didn't scroll down.
actually, oh, maybe I have a new cover for it, so I need to put that up there too. But it's if you, okay, so it started as the idea was Scooby-Doo in the 9th century
Sold.
with demigod, so they have magic
Sold.
wielding Viking kids, right?
Okay.
Except that it's not funny because I can't write funny. I'm not very good at that. I mean, I can infuse some humor, but it's scary, and it's based on like myths and folk tales of the time. So the first two main episodes the first episode, they go after what's called a mewling, which is this creature that it inhabits. It's an infant that comes back to life.
Yeah.
And haunts its mother.
Yeah.
And then the second one, they're going after a draugr, and I brought in a D&D character that I love, one of my favorite characters I've ever played. And so she's going after the draugr, and they're helping her. and ultimately the character in, I don't know if I'm going to do this in the story, but the character in the D&D, she captures the draugr in a sword, and it has a little eyeball on the sword, so that it's
Oh, please do that. Please.
okay. I have a little minifig with her that I had custom made too, with the little eyeball I painted on there. So so yeah, it's a little bit, it's way dark, and it takes it, there's little chapters. It's a serial. So, and I've actually had to pause because right now I'm just in such a crunch that I can't get back to it. But
Yeah,
so we're just on the verge of getting to the draugr.
oh, sweet. Well, that's awesome.
And it's an experiment to see if I can do a serial and to go into the historical fiction thing, and to
Cool.
like Norse roots. And I love mythology. I love all mythology, not even just Norse mythology. So, so it was just a fun way to play.
Oh, that's super cool. Well, you have me at Scooby-Doo.
They have a wolf.
Yeah, man, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, no, that just sounds awesome. It's funny that you're doing that. Like I actually have, my friend mentioned it a while back, and I was trying to do a Kindle Vella, and then I just got like sidetracked by other projects, and because I was trying to do like certain episodes and stuff, and I did like a clump of them, put them as a novella, and then was going to divide them later. And he was like, "Oh, you should just actually now just release it as a novella." Because it's like a 3-part act of a story. So I have like all the episodes is like one act, and I could do a novella, and then the second one would be like, you know, the next 5 episodes, and then like whatever. So I was like, oh, that's right. I was like, I guess I did write another novella technically, but it was really episodic. I do like certain Kindle Vellas that I've read. I think they, you know, they do a good job. I think it's just not quite there yet, if that makes sense. But I enjoy reading them, so that's definitely up my alley. So I'm definitely glad that I looked at it's. I'm gonna have to start looking at people's websites, not on my phone, because you're like the 4th person that I missed something at the bottom because I looked on my phone. So I looked on
scroll for like 9 hours.
Yeah, I just and I talk about that all the time, because that's why I switched from Wix to WordPress, because Wix was like on the phone was horrible, but it was really great online. But you know, 60% of people, 60 to 65% of people, just so our audience know, that are clicking on your websites are going to be on their phone. So if it doesn't look good on your phone, then you know this is a user error. I guarantee it, because apparently I just don't know how to use my phone lately.
I don't know. It might not. It's WordPress. WordPress is terrible. I hate it.
No, I've been checking mine out, and everything's been scrolling. I guarantee it was my kid, and he was screaming, or you know how it is being a teacher. Somebody needed something, and I just got lost. But I just want to make sure I asked that. But I do like that cover, though. It's really cool. But I am looking forward to seeing what you have on that. But that's really
cool. The blue cover.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'd be curious to know. I'll send it to you totally offline. Like, like A or B, because I like this one, but I just sort of whipped it together in Canva to start with. But then I had a cover made, but it's kind of generic, and so I'm like, I don't know which one I like better, really.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, I love that, because I used to, like, my mom's interior designer, and that's like I used to, like I said, I used to want to be an illustrator, so I was doing all sorts. That's like now at school, they're like, can you help with this or do this? I'm like, yeah. So I try and help with graphic design classes and just different stuff as much as possible. But yeah, I love looking at covers. Like book covers are awesome. There's just something about it. I think it's nostalgic, you know, because it's like reminds me of my mom. My mom got me like really into reading. She'd always like buy me the book for, you know, doing well or whatever. And I love looking at book covers, and we used to just go to the library and, you know, check out different designs and stuff. So it's definitely up my alley. But I'm glad we talked about that one. I just want to make sure that I definitely talked about that one. So we talked a little bit privately about your world building reference books. So can you just kind of go more in depth and just, you know, describe those to us, and just kind of tell us kind of how like those ideas came about? Because when you mentioned those to me, I was like, that just sounds really cool. And I think everybody wants to do one, but they're not sure how. So I know I do.
They're literal reference books. There is no real how-to in them. So someone had said to me, like, this would be better if you explained how to use this in fiction.
That's a whole nother book for you, right? Whole nother reference.
Right. And I'd rather like, I do book editing, and I can't say I do coaching. You know, you have friends that you help with writing. So that's what I do. But anyway, I would love to do more coaching. And to help people build settings and build worlds with good realism in them, so that everything is, you know, like we were talking about earlier. And now I've completely lost my train of thought. So these books, where do they start from? So I think I'd mentioned I was in the a science fiction writers conference or whatever, and
Yep.
people didn't really seem to know a lot about things about science, which as a science teacher, I'm like, it's appalling. So, and science isn't about what you know, it's about making sense of things and using what you know to solve problems and stuff like that. But so like just it's not about people knowing all the details, but the details are now in front of you. So you can pick up this book and be like, I want to have my world in a galaxy that's different from the spiral galaxy we live in today. Let's, how about an elliptical galaxy? How would that change how people connect and how people in different star systems now are closer together or, you know, or whatever. So, so it's just a reference book that you can kind of, what's the word I need for when the genetics don't,
Mm.
uh, you know, whatever. So you can just kind of look things up. So it's a lot of bullet points. It's definitely not intended to be read on a like a Kindle. I think they'll be free when I first launch them, October 10th or 11th. For 5 days, they'll be free. So you can grab them, put them on your Kindle, but I guarantee you're going to want you're going to want the print version
Yeah.
because it needs to sit on your desk and you need to grab it. And I don't have one handy, of course, to open up and quickly look inside or bookmark it. You know, this is a section, chapter or whatever. So I've got astrofiction, which is all about astronomy, astrophysics, and astrobiology. I have biofiction, which is the big one that I'm pushing now. So astrofiction is already out, but I'm going to put out a second edition.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so hopefully I add some more to it. And
Yeah.
it's time consuming.
Yeah.
Biofiction, which pretty much just like could be a complete brain dump out of my brain, is for all the living systems, and I've had to shorten that down. So I'm going to make a second one, which I think I'm going to call Evo fiction. I'm not sure what to call it yet, but it's biotechnology. So that's more specific. I had to rip all that out because there's no way this book would be like this.
Oh
big.
yeah, yeah, it'd be a chunker, yeah.
Yeah, chunker. And then robo fiction, which is really about technologies today. So I had worked for a blockchain company, and like I learned so much about like how blockchains are not crypto. Like crypto is just a little tiny way to use blockchain technology. There are so many other ways. And so the company I had worked for was an identity company, trying to pull us all away from the Google and the, you know, having all our data mined and everything, that you could own the data yourself. And this is an amazing concept. So it got me into, and then we got into AI, right? So we got like learning all of these new technologies, and I've been in technology my whole life. So it's not like it was like foreign, but I thought, wow, if I could pull this together and just make sense for all the other people out there, like my mom, who have no idea what AI is, right? And how it can be used and who's using it and what it's used for and like little things like that. So I've organized that into bullet points.
That's impressive in itself.
Yeah. And they do have little chunk, and this is what I need to add to astrofiction, little chunks of like, hypothetically speaking, this could happen, right? Or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it can maybe inspire or give you a like kick off an idea that you can then, you know, move on from, especially if you're new or you're like, I want to write speculative fiction and I don't know a lot about AI right now or whatever technologies,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
VR, whatever. And I want to incorporate that somehow, but I want to talk about it realistically. Then you have this book to sort of give you the overview and help you make
that's cool.
sense of it so that you can make sense in your book.
That's so cool. I just want to mention, like, I had gotten one recently. I'm totally blanking on which one it was. I've had a couple reference books that I bought and I started to use, and I was just like, I'm on a trip, you know. I'm like, I'm just going up this Mordor mountain and I'm writing this novella. But I'm trying to go back to some of these reference books. One I had did like, it was a world building, but it did like tips. So it had like different tips. One, and then also I forget what the other part was, but it was like exercises. So it's like on the side of the different things, but it was just like as an exercise. Yeah, it was cool. It was like as an exercise, like it gave a tip, and then it gave an exercise, and it's like you said, right? Like
writing prompts almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. It is like a writing prompt, right? And it was like, you know, it's an elliptical galaxy, or there's three suns, you know, or you know, something like that. And then it, you know, gave you like parameters scientifically, or gave you a parameter. I like the sci-fi version of it because it was like giving you parameters that where it was like something real and I could look it up, understand it, and then yeah, like kind of write from the writing prompt. I think that's a great way to put it. So I've definitely seen. I just want to say I've definitely seen those and have used those to great effect. So I personally would really think that that would be really helpful. Like within the guide, I would use those all the
All
time.
right.
So
I wrote a
that's really
note.
cool. Yeah, that's really cool.
I still have 6 days to upload files, so I can add that in there.
I literally was like thinking to myself, like my wife's like, you gonna be able to write in time for like finish your novel? I was like, I'm definitely gonna finish in time. I said the issue is to because I was wanting to do January now because of that, like November, December dead spot before, January. I said, well, the issue is like doing all that stuff beforehand. And like you just said, like upload, like the formatting is the thing that I am dreading, I think, the most. So my friend CS Ratliff was I think I'm just gonna try and format and see if he can like edit or help me. I was like, I will give you this if you give me that and help me. I was like, there's just too much to learn, right? As an indie author, like you have to do the ISBN, and I just had people ask me. I'm so surprised, which I'm happy. But I just keep getting bumped back because I keep having good things happen, which is fine. But it's I have people ask me like, hey, I had a couple bookstores near me. I was like, wanted to check with some things, and I wanted to just put a couple copies, like author copies in. They're like, no, 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 no. We don't want you to buy $2 copies and then us sell them for 20 or whatever it's going to be. They're like, we want to actually buy them through Ingram Spark. So now I'm like, shoots. And I'm like, I got to figure that out now. So,
Oh man. Oh, don't even get me started.
but
I
it's
have
that,
so I have print books everywhere except
okay.
Ingram Spark because they give me so much trouble with the cover template that even they give you the template, you put it all on there exactly, and they're like, it's not the right size, and you're like, but it's the template you gave me. So I gave up on them.
I was
But I'm
trying
going
to
to go
work.
back to it at some point when I'm not so busy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, where would you go besides like Ingram Spark?
Book Vault.
Oh, okay. That's good. See, this is good information. That's not something that I would have thought to ask you or somebody else. So that's good to know because this just came up. I just want people, like we have a lot of people, who are just starting out. So I think it's good to know because I just went into the store the other day with my son and I was like, yeah, I'm trying to do this. I just had this idea. And they're like, ooh, no, we can't go through Amazon. But if you go through somebody else, such as Ingram Sparks, so I'll have to see if,
Yeah.
that's one that they can do.
I think for working with a bookstore or something like that, you do have to go through Ingram Spark, or there is one other one. I can't remember the name of it. I don't think Book Vault is it. Book Vault is great for printing your own stuff. I don't know if they have a catalog
Oh,
for,
okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay.
and that's really what Ingram has, the catalog, because Ingram's like an offshoot of Ingram, whatever. And
Yeah,
so they have the distribution system set up.
gotcha. Okay.
So you can put your stuff in there and it goes in their catalog.
Gotcha. Okay. That's probably what they like. But this is good to know though. It's good to know. I didn't even know book vault was a thing. So
Yeah, they do. It's good printing too. So
okay. Okay. Yeah. I'll check that out. That's interesting. What would you say is like kind of like one of the what would be like one of the main like issues or maybe like things that you're trying to deal with now in terms of completing these reference books? Like what would you think is like the most challenging in order like finishing up, like maybe like trying to add things last minute like we just talked about, or thinking like, oh, it's done and that's not done, or indecision? Like I'm just curious, like what's the thing where you're like, oh, I can't wait to be done?
all of the above, but mostly, so I have to, because I put out ad things, right? So get your free book, whatever. Like I did all of those things where you pay to like send eyeballs, hoping that maybe some people will see it. And so I have that deadline, right? And it's only really, those freebies are only for the Kindle version.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I had to put it on KU in order to be able to set it to 0 for, it's just like things I never even knew I had to
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly, right. And then the hard part is there is no ebook editor that likes bullet points.
Oh,
No matter what I do, it looks like crap. And I could go into the Kindle Create and I could space out every single space around the bullet, but as soon as it's a bullet point, it's trapped.
oh,
And I can't format it. And so I'm like, okay, well, ebook's going to be what it is. It's not
yeah.
really meant to be seen that way anyway. it is what it is. You get a freebie.
That's fair.
Hopefully you buy. So like, oh, and I just maybe thought I should add a like, you should really buy this in
Oh
print.
yeah, yeah,
Hate this format? Buy
yeah.
print. Um,
Done on
yeah,
purpose.
files again. But anyway, so yeah, that formatting is really the hardest and most time consuming and painful thing. I know I can format a book. I have like Atticus. It's easy to like
Oh
format,
yeah, yeah.
right? Not bullet points, not even for print. So for print, I have to go into Word. And unfortunately on this computer, I have an old Word. I have to do it on my other computer. Um, so you know, you have to set the
Yeah, yeah.
pages and then you export everything to a PDF and then, which honestly is way easier than trying to get bullet points to work in a
Oh,
in
that's
Action
interesting.
or
Okay.
Create, or what's the other one? Caliber.
Oh
Try them
yeah, yeah,
all.
yeah. Yep.
I
Yeah,
hate
yeah.
them.
That's good to know though, bullet points. So if I'm doing my reference guide, I gotta
Yeah.
do now. Is it just bullet points, or is it just like even if you put like a graphic there, like
The
if you did?
graphics are a little tweaky, like making sure you set them so that they're centered or, you know, however they need to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah.
They tend to work okay. And then the e-reader will read them however they want to. So
Gotcha.
sometimes
Okay.
your e-reader may put them not be centered. So
Gotcha.
you
Oh
can't
yeah,
keep
I didn't think I did have that happen. Yeah.
yeah. But for the most part, those graphics are not that difficult.
Okay.
It's really just the bullet points. And
Oh,
this, they all format bullet points terribly. And I would love it if Atticus at some point for going forward, Atticus, if people are listening, just so you know,
yeah.
I love Atticus for fiction,
Yeah.
not for these reference books. Um, but to be able to manipulate spacing around bullets, headers, things like that. Because like if you put in like header 3, I can control the size, but I can't control how much spacing is around it or
Oh,
anything
that
like
drive
that.
me nuts.
Yeah. So I'm like, I can't use Atticus for this. It's not,
Yeah.
so it's great for romance books. I edit romance books.
Okay.
It's great. It's great for sci-fi.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, and yeah, like if anybody who's listening, if you're new and you're like, what is Atticus? It's just book formatting software that just makes things a whole lot easier, but apparently not bullet points. So
Yeah, not bullet points.
it's so weird. Like it's just like the things you learn, right, by talking to each other. That's why people always ask me like, why do you do the interviews still? I'm like, I learned so much. Like I would never have thought that that would be a thing that you would have an issue with. So I just think that's really interesting. So if you're trying to add that to something that's like, it's probably really freaking good to know, right? Like I
Definitely.
think yeah, that's really interesting. And so you talked a little bit about like how you use real science as a foundation for world building. But can you give us like just like kind of like a specific example, or maybe like, well, you already did, in terms of like using the reference books. What were you able to kind of vary them, kind of like a writing prompt, or was it kind of just like scenarios, like real life, like scenarios or facts? Or I was just kind of curious a little bit more, like when I'm actually opening up the guide, how I'd be able to use it, because I have like a dystopian like sci-fi, and I'm trying to figure out, for instance, it's like a short story, so I'm trying to figure out like, if humans had been underground for 10,000 years, like like how would we change essentially? And I've looked some very interesting information. So if I was trying to find something like that, or what we might be forced to eat if it was like mushrooms or I don't know, something like that. I was just curious, like if I was looking for something like that, like how would I use your reference guide if it was like like the bio one? I'm just kind of curious.
That's a great question. So let's say you have people living underground for a long period of time, assuming Earth gravity.
Yes, yes, it is
Okay.
Earth.
So it's Earth, it's
Yep.
when they're underground. And because there's one thing I hate, it's when people put things like on Mars and they forget that gravity's different there and things don't work the way we want them to there. So anyway, so then you might think about how will their eyes change?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I
Yep.
don't have like that level of detail. That would be again, it would be even bigger book.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I can't write every medical thing there is to know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's sections in there for living under extreme conditions,
Oh, cool. Perfect.
sections for uh so like for example darkness. I don't have darkness specifically. I think we can extrapolate to some degree that your eyes are going to deteriorate, right? But
Yeah.
what other things might happen to your body. So so it's really just like a lot of facts in there that you can look up by section. I'm trying to look up where's my my table of contents. I can quickly give some more examples.
Be easier if I could see my bullet points.
Yeah. So I have things like common treatments for common injuries. So like if you have a sword fight
cool.
and you stab somebody.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know how much blood's going to pour out.
My God. So literally, I don't have to be investigated by the FBI now. That's awesome.
Exactly. Things about immune systems, reproductive biology, circulation systems in different animals. It's really, there's a lot about different animals.
Cool.
Like if you think about an octopus is a completely different kind of organism than a human, and how it is, you know, if you want to make a monster, like you said, based on fear.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's cool.
What about that octopus is so scary in your underground world, or bioluminescence, camouflage, all kinds of stuff. So there are some things about evolutionary adaptations and mutations. So like how mutations occur, like are they epigenetic or various things like that. So stuff like that can maybe help when you're building your world, you're explaining how things happened. That's really kind of where you're going to want to put little bits of science in there. The rest of it doesn't have to make sense. So for example, in my Handler's Gambit book that I wrote, in the Handler's Gambit and the whole Saxon saga, I like the idea of course, being able to jump to anywhere in the galaxy and not have to travel through space, right?
Yeah.
Battlestar Galactica. What I didn't want to do is just have that be, it's because we can do it and it's tropey. I needed an explanation for how that happens. And it also helped. So I used quantum entanglement, and you can just sort of connect molecules here and here, right? And so somehow the computer knows that if the space is clear, I can move people over. But you can't teleport to a planet because then there's gases and things moving all around. It only works in a vacuum. And then it also synchronizes time around the entire galaxy. So if you think about like even in Star Trek, right? They warp speed to some location, and now they have traveled super fast, relativity speaking, and they get there, and now they should be way in a different time zone, where they left. So it makes no sense for them to be like, oh, everything in the galaxy is in sync. So I made it so that quantum entanglement just syncs everyone's clocks together. And since you don't travel at relativistic speeds, you don't ever run into the situation where you're too far ahead or behind somebody else.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so just by having quantum stuff, that's what RoboFiction has in it, quantum stuff.
That's cool.
So that's the kind of thing where like you're like, I need to explain why this works. And so I can go into these books and say, here's some reasons why this could work. And it would make sense to people.
No, that's awesome. You don't want to get like Dark Matter, the TV show, where you have like every place you pop up is a new galaxy and a new timeline. I'm like, that it just got like, and then they were like versus each other. It just got crazy. So, and then the show ended. I wonder why. So, but I think that's
because nobody could make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think that's like a really good use. Now we have everybody like hopefully going and downloading, the reference books. They're like, I need to know how much blood is coming out when I'm stabbing this person here. So I think that's really awesome. And I know we're wrapping up on time, but I just want to make sure that, we're, able to talk a little bit, about the reference books and, about your products. I just want to, leave a little bit of time before we get to that last question there, in terms of, news and updates. Were there any other products or anything like that you wanted to share with us or highlight? Or do you think we, kind of did a good job on most of them? Is there anything else you want to say about the reference books at all? Or
I think we did a pretty good job on most of them. I will say I don't know if you've heard of the Publishing Derby. It's a really interesting program that one of my writing friends does. And so she kind of got me into it. And this is actually what kind of derailed my entire summer. They give you a selection of books and of covers, and you choose a cover, and you basically rank like 10, and then they sort them out. And so usually get one of your top 10 covers. And with each cover, it's a pseudonym or a pen name and a title. and then the cover, right? So, and then you write a story to the cover. It's kind of like a writing prompt, but
That's
it's
cool.
visual. And so I wrote one. Apparently, you're only supposed to really write it like a novella. You don't have to write a full novel. You don't have to write too much. But no, I wrote a 70,000 word
It's awesome.
dystopian story that I can't talk about because you're not allowed to reveal who wrote it, who wrote what books.
Oh, okay.
And then you put them out for sale. So these just went out for sale September 23rd. So like on my website, I need to update that as well. But or anybody who is on my Facebook or in my newsletter, I put out like here's all the books. I can't tell you which one's mine, but there's a whole bunch of really amazing fantasy, sci-fi,
Oh, that's cool.
dystopia, like all kinds of great stuff out there. And some of them are really short. So like if you need a quick read, like it's fun. So that's the other thing that I've been working on.
Oh,
And October 25th, I get to say I wrote it.
oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That sounds really awesome. But I'm glad you mentioned that because that's just like something cool that I've never heard of. So that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we left enough time here at the end, to talk about, do you have any other current news, updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us? That was a really cool one. So I definitely can't wait to check that one out. So that just sounds amazing. So
Yeah, just right now I'm just trying to get these 3 books out, and then hopefully down the road work on some more. The 3 reference books, that is. And then I'm going to jump full time back into writing The Tempest's for Fury, the 3rd book in the Saxon saga. And I'm hoping that will wrap everything up for this little chunk. I have 1,000 other stories for these characters that I may plunge into next year. And I did just commit to doing a table in it's a Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario in
oh,
May
cool.
here. Um, I've been talking to a lot of authors at tables,
Oh,
trying to
cool.
get a feel for like how does this work. And one of them who's a really big popular guy who's at all these cons, and he's so adorable. But he's like, yeah, not until you have at least 3 books. It's really not worth it until you. And I was like, okay, so I'll keep
That's what
that in
I've
mind.
heard. Yeah.
Yeah, but also my writer friends all have books, so I thought I'll just have a table with everybody's books. So
That's, that's fair. That's
that's
fair.
pretty
I
much
say I
all
talked to
the.
a couple people about doing that, about joining together, splitting the
Uh-huh.
cost. That's smart.
Yeah, even if they don't like share the cost, like I'm happy to just have more books on the
Yeah,
table, like
yeah, yeah.
color more. Yeah, it makes you look like, you know, more attractive to come to and talk to. So.
Yeah, no, totally. I love it. You're like, yeah, I just got these 3 things, like the life of an indie author, right? Like, just got these 3 products, like, whereas, traditional publisher, other avenues, like that would take like 5, 6 years, right? You're like, yeah, I just got 3 things I'm publishing. So I always think it's funny, just to, point out to people just the speed in which it was asking like, why do you want to go indie, Dan? Or I would like to do, hybrid eventually, if possible. But it's just nice, it stinks to cut all the costs and everything yourself, but it's nice to just be able to, when you can do it, right, just like throw stuff out, or like you said, I can do these reference books, and I know how to do this, and using your experience. So I think that's really wise. But thank you so much for coming on, Ingrid, and sharing your products with us. And I'll make sure everything's in the description, so send me anything that you want down there. Just want to remind people that whether or not you're checking out Ingrid's science fiction books, or the reference books, or fantasy story, whatever it is, just to make sure that we are reviewing all the products from our authors and creators. Just the easiest way to help people out. So just want to make sure that everybody's going there. And please like and subscribe and share. That way we can share as much as possible Ingrid's products out there. And you never know, maybe you'll be the next reference book person. That'd just be really cool. So it's always my dream to have an interview with somebody and have it just blow up, and just have them like be like, oh my god, like I just had all these sales. Like that just keeps me going. So
I want to be the Bill Nye of the indie
yeah,
book world.
exactly. Exactly. We'll do the production value. We'll just make sure it's just Ingrid's channel, and get the reference books out there. So I think that'd be absolutely amazing. But thank you again for coming on, Ingrid. If there's anything else you need, in the meantime or after, just let me know. Feel free to send me anything, and I'll throw it on our blog. And I'm trying to get back, after the summer and start blogging again. It was kind of crazy. So, but send me anything you have, and especially with the reference books, and I'll put it on all of our social media, and get it out there for you. But other than that, I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much for coming on.
All right, I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. I'll see you later, and I'll talk to you on social media.
Alrighty.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.